The advice and opinions expressed by the host of Autism Live and her guests are meant solely as suggestion and should not be in any way construed as child-specific advice. The Center for Autism and Related Disorders advises working with a board-certified behavior analyst who has experience with autism before starting any intensive behavioral intervention. Any choices you make in determining your child's treatment are completely at your own discretion.
Good morning and welcome to Autism Live. I'm Shannon Penrod. We're webcasting to you live from the Center for Autism and Related Disorders headquarters in Tarzana, California. It's Wednesday, and you know I love Wednesday because a lot of exciting stuff happens here. First, we have Ask Dr. Doreen. Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh will be with us in just a moment answering your questions live. Isn't that exciting? And then a little bit later on today, we will have the wonderful Nancy Alspaugh-Jackson. She is the Executive Director of Autism Care and Treatment Today, and she does an hour with me every Wednesday called Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy, just two autism moms talking about things in the news and interviewing some exciting guests. So thrilled to have both of those segments on Wednesday. I want to start by reminding all of you that there are lots of different ways that you can interact with us. This entire show is meant to be interactive. We want to hear from you. We want to know the topics that you're interested in talking about, the questions that are really burning you up today that you want an answer to. And Emily's going to cycle through some of the different ways that you can get in touch with us here. I'm going to remind you that you can watch us live at www.autism-live.com. When you go there, if you're watching on a computer, the show plays 24 hours a day, 7 days a week there. And we interrupt that feed to bring you the live show. There is also a box that's there, a white box that you can put your cursor there, type whatever you'd like, hit enter, and it shows up magically on my screen. So I can be asking your questions of our experts. I could be asking Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh your question today in real time. That feature is entirely free. You don't have to log in. We don't know anything about you. We don't know where you're writing from. So if there's something that you want more information about, you will want to include your email address. I have a way of editing that out before we show it to the rest of the audience. And if you are watching on a tablet, I want you to know that I hope that by tomorrow we're able to have you watch us live today. Emily says that today it's happening, that you can watch on your tablet. So don't pause, run and get your tablet, and you can be watching us there as well. Isn't that an exciting, it's first day, very excited about that. Thrilling. Okay, so do participate. We hope that you will. And right now, we're going to go to Ask Dr. Doreen.
Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh is
Dr. Doreen is an expert in autism.
Doreen Granpeesheh.
Dr. Granpeesheh.
Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh.
Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh is a visionary in the field of autism, and now you get to ask her questions on Ask Dr. Doreen. Welcome to Ask Dr. Doreen. We welcome to the show Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh.
Good morning.
Good morning, and thank you so much for being here.
Always a pleasure.
It's really our pleasure, and those of you who've watched the show before, you know that Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh is an expert in the field of autism. She is a visionary in the field of autism, and you have been working, I always want to do that thing where I go, you've been working for years, because it's over 30 years now in the field of autism.
Right. It's actually going on 35 years almost.
That makes me laugh because that's a huge number. That's a great deal of expertise, and all of us behind your back, we say you must have started when you were exactly 6 months old.
Yeah, that would be great. Yeah, no, but you know, I just went home yesterday, as you know, one of my old kids came to visit, right? And I was telling my daughter, who's 18 now, I was like, this happened, and one of my older kids came over, and he's like in his 20s and in college, and he just came to visit, and I think the last time I saw him, he was like 7 or 8, and that happens more and more now, and it's so amazing for me. It's just so awesome. I mean, some of my kids that come are like, pretty in their 20s and late 20s and stuff, and it's pretty cool.
And
it's just amazing.
And it was great for me to meet that mom and that son. And after you walked away from us, though, they both said, she looks exactly the same. And I said, yes,
wish.
I fear that there is a painting underneath your bed somewhere that's aging for you, because you're clearly not doing it on your own.
Yeah.
No,
but still, I'm just really happy. Like people like that. It's all. That's what it's all about for me.
Well,
it's just so spectacular to see him and his mom, and she reminded me of all the stuff they went through. When was it? I don't know, 20 years ago or something.
Yeah.
Crazy.
She's a huge fan of yours, as so many of us are.
She's such a lovely person. It was a moment of, we were talking, because they were from the 90s, right? I mean, and we were just talking about like all the stuff parents used to go through in the 90s. It was very different than now. And you go through a lot of stuff right now as well. Obviously, we're going through different issues with insurance and many different issues, just the number of kids. But in the 90s, the numbers were a little bit lower, but it was the beginning of fighting for coverage, for help. People were not as aware as they are now, obviously, about autism, and it wasn't affecting as many lives. So every child that came into the system, we had to go to hearing. And I did a hearing for them, and I remember that. She reminded me, actually, and I remember the early 90s, it was all about going to court and just fighting for the kids to get some funding. It's crazy.
Yeah, I had to hug that mom, because I'm always aware of those parents that went before us that forged the path. They really are the pioneers of autism, and you walked them through that path. You were there cutting that path for them. It's amazing.
I was there, yeah. I mean, I remember, Shannon, in the, I guess it would have been the 90s. I was in hearing every month. I was doing a hearing for a parent for every month. It was unbelievable.
And when we think about, how far we know we still have to go, it is amazing to me to look back and think about those first parents who said, I'm going to make sure that my child gets help. I believe that there is help out there, and they didn't have
anything.
They didn't have anything. It's amazing to me.
No
their bravery.
funding, no programs, no nothing, no insurance, no school funding. And these hearings we would do were against school districts, or for school districts and regional centers to pay, and then it just became the norm.
Yeah, it really gives me chills when I think about the bravery of those parents. There is a video that I have seen of when you all went to Arizona to get the first insurance.
Oh yeah,
and all the legislators and the parents and yourself talking about that moment that everybody went with the idea of, we're going to do everything that we can, but nobody believed that they were actually going to turn the tide of autism in that moment.
We never thought. I mean, Arizona was really, whenever I speak about Arizona, I have to credit Gretchen Jacobs, who lobbied so hard to get the law changed in Arizona, and that was all about her. She put all of that together, all of it, and she changed the entire state of Arizona. And then after that, of course, she sent all of the documents and all the paperwork we had done, and it was a lot of reports they had done to show the importance of this to Autism Speaks, and then their lobbyists, their attorneys just went with it, and they took over the whole country. I mean, they are the pioneers, like people like Gretchen and the Unums Laurie Unum from Autism Speaks. They've done an incredible job.
Well, and it's inspirational to me as a parent, and it always is the thing. I know we've all been in this space where you feel like there's nothing I can do. I'm just one person. It's so overwhelming, and to think of those people and think one person made a big difference, and that gets me to put the shoes on, get up off the couch, and do something.
Yeah,
we all have something we can do.
You've met Gretchen, right?
I have met Gretchen, but I don't know why we have not had her on the show. That was just going through my head. Why have we not had Gretchen on the show? But I have met Gretchen.
Yeah,
she's an amazing, powerful woman. But in any case, we're going to be asking Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh your questions. You've written in a bunch of questions, but the live feature is open. You can write in right now. Emily has asked me to tell all of you that we are live on YouTube. So if you're having difficulty and can't get it on your iPad yet, they're figuring that out, but you can watch us live on YouTube. Go to our YouTube channel, or you can be watching us on autism-live.com right now. We always remind you at the start of the show that Dr. Granpeesheh and everyone who gives information on the show, they will not be giving child-specific advice, because that would be a disservice to our kids. Our kids are all individual, and the amount of information that you, if you give us a lot of information, and I encourage you to give us information, it's still not possible. It would be disservice to the child. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
I mean, we just want to make a point of that, because we never want parents to think they have to do everything we're saying, especially because we're not sure if it applies to the children.
Yeah.
We get so little information about each child.
Yes. So important to know. But having said that, there is so much good information that Dr. Granpeesheh can give us that helps to inform us about what direction to go in next.
Yeah, and I think it was last week that I met with, and you met as well, one of our followers, and that was a pretty big moment for me, and maybe they're watching, or she's watching right now, and I'll say hi.
Yes.
But family who came out from Florida, and I think it was the first family where I felt that a lot of our work here on Autism Live has made a difference for parents.
Yeah.
And thank God, I mean, she told me that not only did she, every week she was writing in and getting various questions answered, but also she's using skills and using IBT, and she's done everything we've said on this show. And things are going so well. I'm actually going out to see them in December.
Yeah. Very exciting. It was so thrilling.
It was wonderful
to meet that family and that are viewers of the show, and to hear how empowered that they feel about the things that they have learned. And I just thank you for taking the time to be here and provide this information.
Oh, I'm delighted. It just is so great to see that any parent can pick up and do all the things for that family. They've gotten funding, they've gotten therapists for their child, they have the program going. I couldn't believe it. I picked up they had a logbook. It looked like a card logbook. She was using our language. It gave me goosebumps. And I was like, who are you? And she's not even American.
She's a powerful mom.
Powerful moms. But it's second language,
Yes,
English.
I can't even imagine.
Having said that, though, she's really doing a fabulous job.
Isn't she? Very
Which
proud of
tells
her.
you that really, if you put your mind to it, you can make things happen for your child. She's
Absolutely.
making a huge difference.
Absolutely. And she and I stood in this very room. I gave her, if you are a viewer and you want to come, I gave her a tour of the very small studio here. It takes all of 10 seconds.
It's so cool.
But we stood in this very room, and I said to her, I said, you're making a huge difference where you are.
Right.
That what you've done is going to help so many more kids. It's amazing to think of that. So thrilling. And
actually, just and sorry, one quick thing in order to help, she is trying to set up. She's trying to gather families in that region of Florida, and we're talking the area around Naples, Florida, that area and broader. So because we're trying to gather some families, I will be out there in December, early December, and then we're hoping to be able to start a card site there. So
it's very exciting. It takes one parent and they get the ball rolling. It's amazing.
That's awesome.
The difference that we all have the ability to make.
Yes.
When we put our shoes on and get up and do what we have to do as moms and as dads. There's dads out there that are making the difference too, and grandmas. Equal opportunity. All right, fabulous. Okay, I want to get started with some of these questions here that we have. One that came in that was a follow-up to the question that we talked about sleeping last week, and we talked about tranquil sleep. And they wanted to know, tranquil sleep, is it to be used alongside with melatonin or just try tranquil sleep alone? It has melatonin in it, doesn't it?
It has 3 milligrams of melatonin in it, as well as theanine and 5-HTP, tryptophan.
Okay, fabulous. So I wanted to make sure that we got that covered. There was somebody else, and I don't know why I can't find it here, but somebody wanted to know if it's common for kids on the autism spectrum to have gray hair. If that's something.
I could just say that I don't believe it's common. I think I don't even have to know the literature on it because I've seen thousands of kids with autism, and I'll say no, it's not common. If you have a child who has gray hair, that's sort of a genetic thing that can be passed on.
Okay, and they're in particular, because I found it now, is it common for ASD kids to have gray hair? Could it be because of any particular vitamin deficiency?
That I don't know about, but no, it's really not common. I would say I haven't seen children like that. There is a genetic streak that essentially produces one streak of gray hair, which people can pass on. It has really nothing to do with autism. I'm not sure what you'd be having to look at. I can't think of what vitamin would lead to pigmentation issues, so I'm not sure about that.
Okay. Another question that we have here, is there a book or something that I can give my mother-in-law to get her to understand autism, ABA, and why she needs to support us and stop rewarding tantrums? I'm fed up.
Yeah, that's a really good question. We're in the process of writing our book, Card Book, which is kind of turning into a massive book, actually, but it will be out next year because our deadline for turning it into the publisher is this end of this year. And so that will be a very, very clear and very comprehensive book about ABA and autism and so on. And because we're starting some courses for community colleges right now, we were looking at books that are out there to see what we could use until our book comes out. Yeah. And it's very hard to find books that are well written yet not too technical.
Right.
There are a few. I think you should possibly start with some story type books, novel, rather than going into like technical ABA. And of course, my favorites would be About a Boy and Let Me Hear Your Voice, because I think they kind of go into is this About a Boy?
You mean Christina Adams?
Yes.
It's A Real Boy.
A Real Boy. I'm sorry, I'm mixing it up with the movie. A Real Boy and Let Me Hear Your Voice. Those two are the story captures you so much that you learn somewhat about what ABA can do and what it can accomplish.
Yes.
So I remember giving some books to my mother years ago so that she would kind of get the idea, and she loved A Real Boy very, very much. It's a real book. Easy read and fun to read, Christina Adams. And Let Me Hear Your Voice is a little bit older. It's Catherine Maurice, and that's a very good book as well. So that's where I would start. And then if she reads those and becomes interested, then by then we'll have the card book out and
there you go.
Send you that.
And I wonder too, just an aside thing, because I remember giving my mother A Real Boy, and my mother read A Real Boy, and I thought that it was really, really helpful. And somebody asked me about this recently, and I said I would give A Real Boy, and then I would also ask them to watch a couple of episodes of The A Word.
Oh, that's a great idea. Yeah. That's a very good idea, I think, because The A Word is our series here, which is fabulous, and it covers a little guy who goes through, and I think it's pretty much every week or
I think there's a new episode that comes out every other week now because he's a little bit older.
Yeah.
And so, but there are so many episodes on their YouTube channel, and I think it does a really good job of encapsulating little moments along the way of seeing what ABA does for a child, and what it does for the family, and how frustrating it can be sometimes, and how your home has other functions while you're going through ABA than just having your mother-in-law come over and have coffee whenever she wants. Right.
It's so true. It's so true.
And the whole idea of why we don't want to reinforce a tantrum is throughout that series. So
yeah, it's hard. I mean, you have to understand, because grandparents always want to spoil the grandchild. That's part of being a grandparent. But it is difficult. But I think these are the best ways. I mean, you're right. The video series will show you a lot of situations where giving attention is not good, and how you can change behavior. So that would be very good. I really couldn't find. I did pick a book ultimately for our course series, which is sort of less technical, but I don't remember the name of it right now. So if this writer or viewer wants, I can certainly give that information to you once I go upstairs.
All right, great. Another question that I promised yesterday I would have you weigh in on, how to redirect lining up. My son is 3 and just recently started doing this many times throughout the day with different things. As soon as I tell him that that's not the way he's supposed to play or whatever it is, he stops, but as soon as he forgets, he does it over again.
Yeah, so lining up is, I mean, the way to block it or prevent it, you just have to destroy the line, right? And you have to constantly destroy the line. And it will, lining up is an obsessive behavior, sort of, it's classified under self-stimulatory behaviors, but really it's sort of one of the obsessive compulsive behaviors, right? So it's a compulsion. And compulsions, as I've always said, indicate anxiety. So when you have a child who lines up, it could be a visual self-stimulatory as well. Like some of our kids line up and then they kind of look at the line in a certain way. Other kids line up because they want some form of order in their environment. And it's funny because to me, autism is a little bit more complex than just obsessive compulsive disorder. And it might be that their visual field is so disorganized. In other words, it might be that what's coming at them, you know, like for us visually, we have a base, like a background and 4 figures that are on top of it. But imagine if everything was just floating in air, right? And you'd want to organize your visual field somehow.
Yeah.
And so it might be that that's the reason they need it. But regardless, what I'm saying is it does tend to be, the reason that we line up is to gain control over our environment, is to, I guess, you know, organize and so on. So I would replace this with something else that allows the child to feel a little bit more, less anxious, more safe. And also perhaps it's something that has to do with organization. Like you realize we do a lot of things that are obsessive, but they're okay. So, you know, like you could have the child organize books on a bookshelf. You could have the child, I don't know, organize papers in a thing, or like pencils or pens, or even clothes in a drawer, or whatever. Things that are okay to organize.
Those are
things
great
that
life skills.
They're efficient, exactly.
You can't work at the Gap unless you have those skills.
There you go.
You know?
In fact, that's a good point. It's like the child might like doing things like folding because it's a neat and organized thing. Otherwise, I don't know. I mean, you can also, a lot of our kids tend to also, who like to line up, and by the way, lining up has decreased over the years, which is sort of interesting when I think about it. But a lot of our kids like trains because of that, because they have to put tracks together, and it's a line of train tracks. But then on the other hand, you could also, the child might also be interested in things like alphabet, which is like lined up in some forms, but replace it with something that's functional is really what I'm saying. Because blocking something that repeatedly happens will always come back. And you block it, it'll always come back in some other form.
Okay, great. Great advice. We're going to take a break and come back and have Dr. Granpeesheh answer more of your questions on Ask Dr. Doreen after these messages. Stick with us.
For the month of August, I figured we'd do some fun in the sun activity. We're gonna make our very own frozen bowling game. It's super fast and super easy. I was inspired by some lessons I saw in skills. All right, so let's get to it. The materials you'll be needing are water, water bottles, balloon, and food coloring, which is always optional. First step you're gonna do is make your bowling ball, since it'll have to freeze overnight. The first thing I'm gonna do is take my balloon and put a few drops of food coloring in it. This is optional. If you don't have food coloring or your child has an allergy to it, don't use it, but I thought it'd be fun to make everything super colorful. So, I have my food coloring. I'm gonna put a few drops in here. And then, you know, take this to the sink and fill it up with water and tie a knot. Here's my balloon filled with the water and the food coloring. I'm gonna take this and place it in the freezer with some towels, just so it holds its shape better. Our next step is to make the bowling pins. I have 10 recycled water bottles that I've refilled with water. Now I'm gonna put some food coloring in them.
Straight to the center at full speed. light will surround you in a blink of an eye.
Now that my bowling ball is frozen and my pins have been filled with water, let's go outside and play with these.
See all the colors in the sky tonight. It's time to let the sunshine hide.
I hope you and your family have fun with the frozen bowling game like I did with my friend Emily. Well, until next time, craft on, guys. Bye.
Can you see me flying by your side?
Welcome back to Ask Dr. Doreen. We're here with Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh, a true visionary in the field of autism, an expert in the field who's been working in the field for well over 30 years, we established this morning. But so thrilled to have you here and have you asking questions, answering questions. We're asking you questions. And we had a question that I think cuts right to the heart of a whole lot of things. And I know that you are a great person to answer this question. Why does ABA cost so much?
Right, so that's very good, actually. Well, so let's look at that. It costs a lot and let's start with the very first reason. It is unbelievably intensive. Okay, so it's funny because one of the insurance companies, the chief medical officer and I were meeting, having dinner, and she said to me, I don't think we've ever had in the history of insurance funding any intervention that is this intensive, right? And nothing really even comes close to it, because if you think of speech or anything else like that, they're like, what, a couple of times a week. And ABA is maybe 2 to 3 times a day, 2 to 3 times a day, and it's 1-to-1, right? So in other words, if your child is receiving a 40-hour program, that means there's some paraprofessional providing 40 hours of intervention for your child and not doing anything else. So that means that what you have to pay for is the equivalent of that paraprofessional's entire salary. Right? I mean, and what we actually do in ABA, as you know, is we'll take 5 people and add up 40 hours. But regardless, it's a 1-to-1 exchange almost. So it's almost like one full-time job. Okay. So on top of that, you have a supervisor who also overlaps and may spend somewhere about, I would say, 2 to 4 hours a week of working on your child's case. If your child's going rapidly, then more hours and so on. Programming, writing reports for your insurance so that they can get funding, et cetera, et cetera. And that adds on top of it. And the training that's required, so like you can't even imagine, Shannon, like we now are setting up this community college program where and we're also setting up, we're just about to get approved. I don't want to jinx it, but we're just about to get approved with East LA College, because this lady who we had met at Pierce actually moved to East LA, and she's setting up a program with us which is for returning veterans. And so it's a work preparation program, which once we are approved, we can do this across the whole country. And so what we do is we're going in and training people to the minimum regulations of SB 946. SB 946 is the law, the mandate, the insurance mandate in California. And the minimum requirements to give ABA therapy in the state of California are, for the paraprofessional, are about 30 hours of class time, as well as 6 months of experience. So we're training these veterans, and we've set up a program to train returning veterans in that position. Wow. And then to be able to offer them jobs at CARD all over, because you know we're always looking for therapists, right? And apparently what's interesting is the majority of the veterans that will be coming into our program are female, which I didn't even realize, which is great, because most of our therapists are female as well. And as you know, we always love the guys as well, because the kids love the guys. Yes. But anyway, so it takes a bit of training, and that's the junior therapist entry level. We're talking 6 months of experience, right? With children of different levels, which is overseen and supervised, as well as 30 hours of coursework, right? That's pretty much like it's almost like a course at university. Now, you take all of that and you enter the field at I don't know, close to maybe $18 to $20 an hour. And an organization that is like CARD, for instance, that has over 1,000 therapists all over the country, is also giving you benefits. Like we also provide all of our staff a lot of benefits, not just health, medical, visual, whatever else, which adds on to the expense. But also things like we have to, and we do, pay our staff when they drive.
Right.
So our staff is driving from your house to another house to another house and so on. And so what happens is there's a lot of drive time, which they're being paid both mileage and time, which adds up quite a bit as well. So an individual who's getting paid, let's say on the average $20 an hour, and this is the junior therapist level, 18 to 20, will actually cost the company more like 24 or so an hour. And so if you really think about the cost of doing 40 hours a week, just at even, let's say, $25 an hour, it adds up. That's when it becomes very expensive. And on top of that, don't forget there's the supervisor. And supervisors, all of our supervisors, and most insurance mandates now require this, are board certified and or licensed. So you're talking about a professional who is now board certified, and these are people who enter the field at about $75,000. They enter the field. With a salary of $75,000. And at CARD, we really are very, very strict about the supervisor training. So they go through a massive amount of training with us, during which time, by the way, we're paying them. But we're not really billing them because they're in training. So it's kind of, it does become very difficult and expensive to provide quality staff. And with added to that, of course, is the fact that it's very intensive and they drive and all of these additional costs, So that's why it adds up. We are now, as you know, many of our sites, I'm not sure how many, but of the 25, probably at least half are providing center-based model, which is kind of good for families because you could drop your child off at our center. It reduces our costs a little bit, which is driving, and it also allows you to be able to go do other things or go to work.
And it also, I think, provides a ready place when kids need to interact with other kids. It's an amazing thing. It's thrilling that that's where autism is going.
It really is. And I don't know how other agencies or owners of other agencies deal with these issues, but I would say the vast majority of our kids are funded, so not a lot of our families are private funding, and we have, and the National Institutes of Mental Health or National Institutes of Health has actually written this, published this. We've put easily between, I would say, 800,000 to 2 million back into research every year. So the company is not producing massive profits. Everything that we make goes back into autism. And so but nevertheless, having said all that, it's hard for families. I completely get it, which is why I've spent a lot of my life helping families try to gain new sources of funding. Right now, insurance is the main way to go. We have some problems with insurance. We're trying to work that out. We're trying to, and if it's okay, there's something that I'm pretty passionate about that I want to say on the show, because very shortly we will be really trying to get this news out. We're having a lot of problems with some insurance companies canceling our kids or denying cases. And some of the reasons for these denials are just atrocious. They're not acceptable. I mean, CARD is well known in the industry for the quality of the intervention and the data. I mean, we take massive amounts of data on our children, and now Anthem, Blue Cross of California, is specifically telling us that our children over the age of 10, we need to provide graphs going back to the beginning of their intervention, regardless of whether or not Anthem funded it. It doesn't matter if it's 8 years ago, and they want raw data and graphs. And so we're talking, in some cases, and particularly, they're saying we're not convinced. I mean, this is statements that have been said to us. We're not convinced that ABA is in any way effective for children over 10. And you know, if you start going there, this could be someone's opinion. I don't really care. This is not the law.
Right.
And so you are actually discriminating.
Right.
And I'm pretty upset about this because I already have something, I think 6 or 7 of my kids are put on hold, which they call the case is pended, and that means they're not getting funding while they're put on hold. And the reason what they're waiting for is for us to send graphic data, in some cases dating back 6, 7, 8 years ago, and we have the data, but the parents don't want to release the data because why should they?
Right.
Anthem was not even involved in the child's case before last year. And so there's some issues like this that are happening right now, and I'm very upset with Anthem about this. This is really pretty inappropriate for an insurance company, and it's shocking to me because Anthem has already once has gone through a class action lawsuit, and if they're going for it again, they're going to cause problems for themselves.
I hope that people are paying attention, and we covered it here on the show, to the fact that Kaiser did a settlement the other day to the tune of $9 million.
That's right.
And that was that's to cover the cost of services before it was the law of the land.
Right.
And I hope that insurance companies sit up, pay attention,
right,
because we're not going away, and we live in a litigious society, and we know how to do that if need be.
Right.
And autism moms are really busy, and autism parents in general are really busy, but don't tick us off.
Right.
We get really mad really quickly.
It just isn't right. I mean, I can't sit back and watch this, and I will be reaching out to a lot of more powerful sources than I. And I will be I'm not going to let this go because I see these kids. These are some of my kids who've been in the field for a while, who've been with me for a while, and the system has just completely unfair to them. These are kids who started out and they had some funding, let's say from the school district, and then or regional center, and the regional center reduced their funding and said, okay, now it's the school district has to share with us. Okay, well, the school district did for a little while and then dropped off, and then the parent had to fight again and get regional center to continue. The regional center wouldn't even fund more than, let's say, 10 or 15 hours. And then insurance came in and everybody was like, oh, wonderful, a new source of funding. And before you knew it, as soon as insurance came in, regional center dropped off and said, hey, we'll fund co-pays. And then they, 6 months later, no, we're not even going to fund co-pays anymore. And so they're out, and now insurance has dropped them. And this is just not okay.
Yeah,
it's not.
Passing the buck.
Yeah, exactly.
It's unconscionable. And it kind of feeds right into, we had a follow-up. Hi, Dr. Doreen. I'm the parent that wrote about my child getting 10 hours of ABA through regional. I already started the process with CARD, and hopefully within 1 month I will start my child with full productive ABA. I already called your assessment office and started the process to get all 3 kids assessed, even though just 1 was diagnosed. When my son had the exit interview at the regional, the psychologist stated that he will continue services after 3 and that the school district will offer speech and OT. My question is, do I need to go through the school district and start the IEP? Does that mean he will start school at 3? But like I said earlier, I have started the process with CARD, and hopefully I will get him full-time like you recommended. Do I need to go through the school district? If not, how do we get him to interact with other peers? I'm so confused about this whole school district crap. Please help. Thanks again for all that you do, and God bless you guys. I talked a little bit about this earlier in the week because the question had come in, but I said that we were going to talk to you about this.
Yeah, I can easily answer that.
Yeah.
So it really depends on, first of all, your district and your other sources of funding. So if I knew which district you were in and which regional center we're talking about and what type of insurance you have, I could give you better advice.
I believe this was the Riverside one.
Okay.
If I'm connecting it with the same person, I'm not 100% positive, but I think it's the Riverside Regional Center.
Well, that would be inland, and so with inland, it's a little bit difficult. I don't really trust inland all that much personally because they do change quite a bit, and it's haphazard. There's no real way of knowing. But what I would want to tell the parents is a few things. One is, at the age of 3, The regional center can potentially say you're at the age where in California school age considered 3, in other states it's 5, but anyway. So at 3, you do kind of become the responsibility of the school district. Having said that, you do not need to be attending school. You can also be doing activities at home. You could have preschool that's private. It doesn't have anything to do with it. It's just that the school district should start to participate. The likelihood that they will at 3 is minimal. It's more likely they will start actually funding something closer to 5. So, however, I really do recommend that Riverside, I do recommend that you do attempt to get involved with the school, get an IEP. What happens is you have a series of assessments done, and why not have your school district do it? Sure. They won't do IQ, but they'll do other types of assessments, testing, and they have to do that every 3 years. It's called a triennial assessment, and it's worth it because otherwise it's expensive to get it done. Now, the school, you should have the school do it without making the school think that you're going to be asking for special services. Because if the school has the impression that you're going to be asking for a lot of funding, then they'll make then I'm not sure how accurate or valid or reliable the assessments will be. Let's just let them assess, let the psychologist at school assess.
That's a really good point.
Without knowing why. I mean, it's your right at 3 to get your assessments done for entrance, anyway, for an IEP, for the purposes of an IEP. Once you get the assessment, you'll take a look at it, and most likely what will be recommended is if there is a preschool program in the district, then they'll suggest you go to that preschool program. Otherwise, and by the way, the assessment process will drag on for a while.
Yeah.
Okay. So just so you know. Most likely there won't be anything if you, you can skip doing anything at 3. You don't really have to do any kind of schooling until 5 in California. But what happens with the regional center is they will start to reduce. So yeah, school might fund school and OT, which doesn't hurt. It's obviously helpful to get more and more. The more you have for your child, the better. So occupy the child as much as possible. But still, typically, we're still mainly receiving funding from the regional center at that point, even though they don't have to necessarily. The type of funding changes. So once school funding does come in, school then focuses more on language and academic. And maybe social, if we can argue that. Regional center funding focuses on adaptive, safety, those types of things, daily living. So like, if your child has issues like, my child runs away, that's a regional center issue.
Right.
My child is not toilet trained, that's a regional center funded thing. My child doesn't speak, that's more of a school district type thing. My child hits his sibling and it's dangerous, regional center. My child doesn't interact with anyone, probably both.
Right.
So it's kind of like, that's sort of the divide there. So yes, your best bet is to get about 15 hours from regional center and maybe 10 from school, and then later you can increase school. As child gets kindergarten age, you'll get some more hours from school, and then that way it'll add up to about 25 to 30 hours, which is great. That does not mean that you need to be going to school for 25 hours or whatever. A lot of our kids, they go maybe 6 hours, 9 hours a week, and the school will fund a shadow. But they don't have to just fund a shadow. The school district could fund the entire program as well, just so you know. What they will tell you is, well, you're not in school, what are we funding? We're not going to fund anything. They could literally fund an agency like us, that's why we're called a non-public agency, to provide all the therapy around the clock. The only days that they wouldn't pay for are school holidays. That's it. The rest of the time they pay. In fact, some IEPs mandate them to pay through Christmas, through the summer, and so on. So you can have all that funding. If it starts to get litigious, I really do suggest you get an attorney. There are several attorneys that are very, very good at this. Bonnie Yates is an attorney who's worked with us for lots of years. Bruce Bothwell is another very good attorney. I think Bruce does a lot of work in Riverside. I'm not sure who else would. I don't even think any of my families have gone to court in Riverside or have required an attorney, but you never know. You sort of have to go with it. And they will fight both. They'll fight in the regional center and the school district if they need to. Yeah. Otherwise, they can just advise initially. Now, and by the way, if it ends up going to court, school district cases, and you win, the attorney gets paid from the school district, not from you. So that your attorney, so it's part of what happens when you take a school district to court. Now, insurance obviously is easier than all of this. If you have insurance funding that is decent, as I said, you have a very young child, yeah. So you're not going to have a problem even if your insurance is Anthem, Blue Cross. You'll have, it depends on your type of policy. If you have insurance through your employer and it's an employer over 50 employees, then most likely you'll have coverage. Right. You can always contact our people here and they'll help you figure out if you have coverage. Yes. At CARD. And then that's our contracts department. You just call admissions actually, and if you want to get into CARD, they should be checking your insurance coverage right now if you've already contacted CARD.
Absolutely. Yeah. And just to summarize, it's interesting because we start out talking about the regional center and the school, but it always comes back to funding because they are places that will provide funding for your child to get the help that you want. Yeah. It is a process, and it does get complicated because you're dealing with different entities. And it's something you make peace with.
And all you have no choice. But the worst part of it is, I think that each entity tries to tell you that it's the other entity's responsibility, and actually it's everyone's. They are all responsible. I have kids who are 18 and still regional center funded, so there's no such thing as we stop at a certain age. They don't. Just their involvement changes. But and believe me, if you have an advocate, you don't really even need an attorney. If you have a parent advocate, they're not telling you the same stuff. The whole story changes.
Absolutely. But you get better at advocating for yourself, and you get the help and the support you need. And I think the biggest thing that I want to throw in as a parent is that it looks overwhelming and impossible. When you look at it and you go, I have to figure out funding to find this much funding, and I have to get it from a regional center, a school district, an insurance company. And you know what it's like calling your insurance company just on the phone, and they say, push 3 if you want to have this phone call continued, right?
My God.
And an hour later, you still haven't talked to a person. It seems overwhelming, but I would remind you that so many of us have done it. So many of us have done it, and we would all say to you, it's worth it. Get through it. Talk to other parents like myself and other people to say, how'd you do it?
Yes,
how did you work it? Who'd you talk to? How did you make sense of it so that you didn't completely lose your mind? Because we all lost our minds a little bit.
Right.
Let's be honest.
It's so true.
But so that you find the way to get through it, and it is. Yeah. You are able to navigate it. I can tell you firsthand.
Right. And it would be so good. I mean, I've talked about one of the things we're developing here is sort of the DG's list concept, where we have referrals that other parents comment on. I think it would be so awesome if maybe even on the same site, we're working on that, by the way, but it would be so great to have other parents, like a parent blog where you can communicate and write, because we have so many families on our mailing lists. It would be wonderful to be able to just write on there, are there other parents from Riverside? What's your experience been?
Exactly.
And they can tell you exactly what's going on in the area.
And that's invaluable information. Yeah. Invaluable, because then you don't have to reinvent the wheel.
Right.
And who has time to reinvent that wheel?
Exactly.
Fabulous, fabulous advice. I do have to say that we have a message. Yes, we're watching from Florida. We love you. Can't wait to see you here in Florida.
Awesome.
Thank you. We're so thrilled that you guys are watching, and so thrilled that we got to meet all of you. It was really, really great. Okay, another question here, scrolling back up. Somebody wanted to know, and this came from a person who is an adult. They wanted to know, how do you know if you have autism? A power pack question.
Yeah, that's a pretty amazing question. I guess, I mean, if you're a functioning adult and you've done well, you have a job, you have a family, or maybe you don't have a family, maybe you don't have close relationships, but you are functioning, perhaps you're not at your best, or you haven't been happy, then that's possibly what would be leading you to think, maybe I have autism. But nevertheless, if that's the case, in other words, if you're wondering about this as an adult, that means you're very, if at all, your limitations are very minimal, right? The things that you're wondering about are very, very minimal. So I suppose they would be things like the things that you would be thinking about would not really be in the realm of autism. They might be in the realm of, let's say, what we used to call Asperger's.
Okay.
So in most cases, when you start wondering about, do I have autism as an adult, you're really wondering, do I perhaps have sort of some signs of Asperger's, or maybe some signs of social communication disorder. And these signs are things like, I really don't understand people as a whole. I don't know what their facial expressions mean. I can't read people. I can't understand. I'm not very good at taking their perspective or understanding where they're coming from. Now, keep in mind, a lot of people are bad at taking other people's perspectives. So It's a little bit more drastic than that. It's kind of like, I just don't know how to handle people at all. A lot of times I find my adults with Asperger's really do have some other really spectacular skill. Like really, in other words, because you've had a weakness or an inability to understand social behavior, you've developed an incredible strength in some other area. Whether it's music or analysis, mathematical engineering, whatever it is, you're just a master at that. And so, you might be thinking of those things, and it's kind of like, I don't know, I don't really consider that to be a disorder for me. I just consider it to be something different. Because if you're functioning, and perhaps you're upset, like let's say you don't know how to get a girlfriend or a boyfriend, or a spouse or something like that. Well, you can learn those things. You can read about those things. You can take classes. You can talk to other people who are in the same boat. You can learn about those things. It's just like anyone else. It's like, I don't know how to balance my checkbook. Yeah, I can go get a class on it and I can learn. I don't know how to change a tire. These are all necessary things as well for living, right? But or I'm depressed. Well, let's find out why you're depressed. Let's change your perspective on life. Let's help you find things that get you out of depression. Let's help you be less unhappy about yourself. All those types of things. So, not saying that you wouldn't benefit from some sort of specialized help or guidance or therapeutic help even, or educational or something, but let's not call it something that it's not necessarily. A disorder, it has to be debilitating. A disorder is, by definition, has to be something that makes you not functional in your home life or in your work or school life. Let's just remember that, including autism. I might have a child who's very asocial, but you know what? He doesn't care. He gets straight A's. He's a smart kid, and his parents are fine with it. Everybody's fine with it, but he's not a very social kid. So what? That doesn't make him have some sort of social disorder.
Right.
So disorder starts with something that interferes with the other aspects of your life.
Okay.
And again, even something like depression, for instance, you could be just I don't know, have melancholy, but you won't qualify for a disorder of depression.
Great.
So the severity of it matters.
Okay.
And so don't worry about the label. I even tell parents whose kids do qualify for autism, don't get fixated on the label. Just break it apart and see what are the deficits, what are the strengths, and strengthen those areas that need to be strengthened. That's it.
Fabulous advice. And sort of hand in hand, somebody has written in and saying, well, how do I understand emotion? How do I read facial expressions?
That's terrific. So there's a lot of programs to teach you that. I mean, it's funny because one of my many of my older kids who've recovered come back and tell me that life is a little different for them. It's almost like they continue to always speak a second language. So, you know, when you learn a second language, you're always kind of, even for me, like, you know, English has been is my second language, but I've been speaking it since I was 4 years old, right? But still, sometimes, and perhaps it's because there's too many languages in my head, but sometimes I can't find the right word in English. I just can't. I can find the right word in Farsi, Persian, or in some other language, French or something, but I can't in English for some reason, right? So I think people who overcome autism, some may have similar issues. They will always have to focus in order to make things go fluently.
Right.
You know, it's kind of like aging.
Yeah.
So, and they always have to learn things. It won't necessarily come naturally. Nick used to say to me that, like, there were so many things that he taught himself over time, he learned. And so how do you learn facial expressions? It's very simple. There's material out there. You can print out these things and you can look at the facial expression and you can memorize it. And then when you see it in people, you'll recognize it. Just like a 3-year-old wouldn't understand some subtle facial expressions, whereas when they're 10, they do. How do they learn that? They're exposed to it. They see it. And then they read other people's impressions about it. So, you know, just like you could look at a set of cards or videos and say, oh, okay, this is surprised, that's angry, and so on. More advanced facial expressions have been explained and described like that as well. There's a really good DVD. Simon Baron-Cohen's group made it. I forget the name of it, but it's, if you look up facial expression videos, you'll find it for sure. And it's training. It's training to show you the differences, of very subtle differences of facial expression. So that's one. Emotions, you read about it. You actually get psychology books. I mean, if you're that high functioning that these are the two main areas for you, you educate yourself about it. We do have a big section on this in skills. It's its own lesson, actually, emotions in the cognitive area, and facial expression, I think, is in the social area. But we have a lot of, if you look at our social curriculum, our cognitive curriculum, and our executive functioning curriculum, it's all this abstract stuff which is there. So that will give you a lot of information, and also a lot of books. There's been a ton of books written on this issue. Simon Baron-Cohen was the first person that came up with the whole concept of theory of mind, perspective taking, and his group at Cambridge in London, in England, Cambridge, they have a lot of books on this. Francesca Happy, H-A-P-P-E, she's written a lot of books on these issues. They describe it. Tony Atwood talks a lot about these types of things in his books. He has training tapes. So, and they're very easy to comprehend. So I would start there.
I think that's absolutely wonderful. Emily, we have time for one more, or are we done? She says we got, and this, now I've left the big one for the last. Can you talk a little bit more about sensory processing disorder? We've had a lot of questions about that come in.
Yeah, sensory processing is a big deal. I'm trying to see how I can answer that in 2 minutes. So I guess the closest I can, I think, first of all, let's just define it. First of all, this is many of our patients, clients, children and adults experience their senses differently than we do. They crave certain types of things like pressure or you know, various types of tactile stimulation, or they will crave visual stimulation, or auditory even. I mean, some of them do crave making noises with their ears and so on. So, or they avoid certain sounds, visuals, like certain lights will bother them. They hear sounds much more like loudly than we do certain sounds. They will hear things in the background that we're not even aware of, and that's loud for them and it bothers them. Whereas voice and language and so on will not necessarily be a loud sound for a lot of our kids, and so it's hard to focus on those things. So there's a lot of, so essentially that describes their senses are dysregulated. They're not receiving information through their senses the same way we do.
Okay.
Whether it's tactile or visual or auditory or whatever it is, proprioceptive even, like how their body is in space. They're not receiving information from the environment the same way we do. So as a result of that, they're made hyper or they're made lethargic. So just imagine if you have a massive amount of visual input, like lots and lots of lights flashing in front of you and so on, or the lights bother you, and so you're going to become a little bit more isolated or resistant or trying to avoid lights, or it might even in some cases cause hyperactivity, because it's almost as if certain lights that cause seizures and so on, it'll increase brain activity and you become hyper from it. If you have a need for tactile sensory input, you might feel very anxious, your skin's crawling. We have similar experiences, but we just don't have it as acute and as chronic. So it's like stronger, I believe, for our kids, and it's all the time.
Okay.
So because of that, when you have these types of issues and they're pretty severe, it's important to try to do as much as we know. We don't know enough how to do these things, but there are exercises, obviously, with lights and so on. What do? You wear glasses, you wear sunglasses. So a lot of our kids, we have to be just cognizant of the fact that the visual input could be bothering them. So a lot of times we try to not have fluorescent lights because we hear that they can possibly, the flickering, they see it. We try to be very aware of our kids' noise, how noise and sound disturbs them or bothers them. And that means, if you see the child like just distracted, wonder to yourself, are they listening to something that you can't hear? These are things to pay attention to. And of course with tactile, that we do a lot of exercises. Like some of our kids really do benefit from big squeezes or feel safer if they're covered, their clothes are covered. We massage our kids, we roll them in a blanket, and we give them the experience that allows them to feel a little bit more secure in their own skin. And these types of things actually do reduce the child's hyperactivity level when necessary. And in some cases it wakes the child up, because sometimes our kids become just lethargic.
Okay.
So, in a nutshell, that's how I see sensory integration problems.
So one question, in terms of the new diagnosis, is it a separate diagnosis from autism?
No,
it's part of autism.
Yes, it's just considered one of the symptoms now.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Fabulous to know. It's so exciting to have you here.
Thank you so
thrilling
much.
to have you here. We look forward to having you back more every week. And thank you all of you for writing in these wonderful questions.
Wonderful questions, yeah.
We're going to take a break and go to the A word. This is that series that we were talking about before that's great for giving out to the babysitter or the mother-in-law or the aunts and uncles to let them know a little bit about what you're doing in your home when you're doing ABA therapy. It's an ongoing documentary being made by the Center for Autism and Related Disorders. It follows Jack Riley, a little boy who was diagnosed with autism at the age of 2. At this point in the series, he is getting close to his 4th birthday. He's a big brother now. He's already started preschool. And he's still working on things at in the home that will help him to be more productive as he goes out into his life. So take a look. This is the A word. And when we come back, Nancy Alspaugh-Jackson will join us for Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy.
I know a cute little blue-eyed boy, and his name is Jack. Jack Riley. He got a big, warm, blue-eyed soul that makes your heart beat fast.
At 9:00, you go potty, and then you can have the iPod after you go potty.
First, we have to go. No, later we can go potty.
If you do it really fast with no crying, you can play with the iPod.
Again.
Okay? But if you cry and you do it slow, no iPod. All right? He has to use the bathroom with no behaviors and do it not really fast, but in a good amount of time versus lagging and crying and tantruming and prolonging what he has to do. And if he does it quickly and fast, he gets his reinforcer. If he doesn't,
then he doesn't get his reinforcer, so he learns. We're hoping he learns it the next time. If he does it quick with no behaviors, then he gets what he wants every time. So we're gonna try to go past that hump, like you did with everything else, like the feeding, and if you remember that, and the safety and the walking outside, like all of that. So this is just a little bump in the road. I think will be cool. So we'll see how that goes today. Hopefully it'll go good.
It's 9 o'clock. Let's see if we can do it fast, and then you can have the iPod. Let's do it.
There you go. Does somebody get to play iPod?
Yeah.
Yay! Hey, did you do the potty with no crying?
No.
No crying, right? And did you do it fast or slow? Fast. Yay! So what do you get?
iPod.
Yay!
I hear someone.
Hi.
Who is it?
Hi, Diana.
Hi.
What brings you here today, Diana?
I just wanted to come and see Jack Riley and make sure everything was going smoothly.
And how often does that happen?
I try to come out and see Jack Riley once a month during a home session.
You're playing with the iPad.
I have to make sure I get all your learning stuff in here.
I made a jack-o'-lantern. No, what'd you make?
Elephant.
You made an elephant! So cool, Jack.
Yeah, so with Mom and Dad, the bathroom occurrence with behaviors still happening. But we did it with Dad today. It was a lot better.
Dad did it? Okay, good.
But nonetheless, it still happens when we're not here. So I was thinking maybe we can fan ourselves out and just be outside the bathroom.
How much prompting does he need to actually get through, like, the motions? Is it getting through the motions, or is it just the behaviors?
Behaviors.
Yeah.
He can do everything
He can do
by
it.
himself.
Are you doing that nicely or not nicely?
Doing it nicely.
I don't think so. You're crying. So are you doing it nicely or not very nicely?
Not very nicely.
Yeah. When you wash your hands, should you be crying or not crying? You know what? I want you to show me how you wash your hands nicely. Okay? Let's go.
That was so much better. Jack Riley, that was awesome. That was so good.
Do you want to go upside down? Yeah. Okay. No crying when you're going potty. Okay? Are we gonna work on it? Yeah. Yeah. Okay, good.
That's it.
I know, that's the point. That's the point. Again? So let's play with that. So let's take videos of him going potty. Well, it'll kind of be a baseline. So if he cries, if he gets upset, review the video with him afterwards. And then talk to him about if it was nicely or not nicely, and then try again.
Okay.
And we can keep reviewing the videos.
Good morning and welcome to Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy. I'm Nancy Alspaugh-Jackson.
And I'm Shannon Penrod.
Yeah, I'm here by the skin of my teeth. The traffic was horrific and my bracelets are crashing against the table, so I'm going to take them off, okay?
Traffic has been crazy. Everybody's
here in
back to
LA, in
school.
the Valley,
It's been a little nutty.
Yeah, but back to school, yippee!
Yes!
You know, I never felt that way before because I always wanted every minute of Wyatt with me.
Yeah.
This summer, with Reed being in the hospital, my husband half the summer, just everything, juggling schedules with Wyatt. When that first day of school came, I was singing the Hallelujah song.
Yeah, I think I was a little relieved too. I feel guilty saying that, but the summer was just hard. And I think he's better when he's got
structure. Our household is completely calmer.
Yeah.
Wyatt's calmer.
Yeah.
Just that, you know, getting up at 6:30, getting the breakfast, the lunch fixed, driving him. I have an hour drive. And then, you know, then I get right to work. It's so much better. I get my run in, then I get to work.
There you go. Yeah, it is a different thing, and it has been exciting back to school, and I feel that same way. Usually it's really stressful for me, and it was stressful on the first day, but I'm thrilled that he's where he's at, and that I it's freed me up to do a couple of other
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
I have to be honest.
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with that.
Nothing wrong with that. And, I hope in the next couple of weeks we're going to be able to get some experts in here to talk about IEPs, some back-to-school issues.
Yeah.
But today, we actually had a guest cancel, but we have so much in the news, Shannon, and I didn't hear about the letter, the hate letter, until late yesterday. And I know that you covered a bit of it yesterday.
Yeah, we did.
So let's tell everybody the story. You want to summarize for them what this story is about?
Absolutely. So a young 13-year-old boy in Canada who he lives with his mom and his dad. His mom has MS. So this family has faced a lot of challenges. And part of what they do with the family to make things work is that in the morning he goes over to spend time with his grandmother. His grandmother is 70 years old, and I spoke with her on the phone yesterday. Lovely, lovely woman, and she said, I'm 70, but I'm trying to do everything that I can to help these kids. They've been through so much, and he's a lovely, lovely young man. And on her doorstep, she got a letter a couple of days ago that it says that it's from a neighbor, and it's signed "One Pissed Off Mother." I think that's in question about whether it is actually from a mother.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
There have been a lot of people postulating that this does not sound like something that comes from somebody who actually is a mother.
Okay.
So, I think we leave room for what it might be.
Okay.
But the gist of the letter, we read parts of it yesterday, and I've got it if you want to read part of it. But at one point, it calls and says that the child should be euthanized.
Well, when I read the letter, I felt like I'd been kicked in my gut.
Sure.
That was my first reaction. And I will read part of it to lady living at this address. I also live in this neighborhood and have a problem, many exclamation points. You have a kid that is mentally handicapped, and you consciously decided that it would be a good idea to live in close proximity to a neighborhood like this? You selfishly put your kid outside every day and let it be nothing but a nuisance and a problem to everyone else with the noise polluting wailing he constantly makes. That noise he makes when he is outside is dreadful! Exclamation, exclamation, caps. It scares the hell out of my normal children. When you feel your idiot kid needs fresh air, take him to the park, you dope. We have a nature trail. Let him run around places and make noise. Crying babies, music, and even barking dogs are normal sounds in a residential neighborhood. He is not. He is a hindrance to everyone and always will be that way. Who the hell is going to care for him? No employer will ever hire him. No normal girl is ever going to marry, love him, and you are not going to live forever. Personally, they should take whatever non-retarded body parts he possesses and donate it to science. What the hell else good is he to anyone? You have a retarded kid, deal with it properly. What right do you have to do this to hardworking people? There he is. There's that precious boy.
Yeah.
Hate people like you who believe just because you have a special needs kid, you're entitled to special treatment. God. No, I would say lack of God.
Yeah.
Do everyone in our community a huge favor and move, vamoose, scram, move away, get out of this type of neighborhood setting. Go live in a trailer or in the woods or somewhere else with your wild animal kid. Nobody wants you living here, and they don't have the guts to tell you. Do the right thing and move or euthanize him. Either way, we are all better off. Sincerely, one pissed off mother. Well, let me tell you, one pissed off mother or father or whoever the hell you are, you have just pissed off an entire community of people with children with autism, and you deserve to be ashamed.
I agree. I agree, and one of the things that I said yesterday, and one of the things I said when I was talking to the grandmother on the phone is, I don't know who this is, and I don't know. It doesn't matter to me whether it's kids or it's a mom or a man. It's not okay, and there's no excuse for it.
It's a hate. It's hate.
It's evident.
Prejudice and hate.
Yes,
there's no other way to describe it.
Yep.
You're in just to get my take on it.
Yep.
Do I feel sorry for this family like I've done for many families who have maybe even abused their children? I had a different side, a different feeling than the mom that locked her older son and gave him food because I said she's a victim too. This is not a victim. This is somebody that spreads nothing but hatred, and this cannot be tolerated.
No, it cannot be tolerated. There's no excuse for it. I do think that I look at this letter and I go, this is a person who has something else going on, and it is nothing to do with this young man.
Definitely.
So I like to put that out there, but I think the biggest thing is for us to support this family, to let them know that we all stand behind them. When I talked to the grandmother yesterday, she said that the family has appreciated that, people have sent things for Max, that people have been calling and writing and sending cards and letting them know that they're not alone in this, and that the family has really appreciated it. And that she did share with me that at one point the mom, Kara Begley, she has MS, had said, this is a terrible thing, but maybe hopefully something good can come out of this.
That's the take I have always, is these things happen for a reason, in other areas of hate and prejudice. When you look at things like Trayvon Martin, when you look at things like Matthew Shepard, when you look at anything hateful, it's an opportunity for us to educate always. Yeah. And unfortunately with an adult, this kind of ignorance really should not be tolerated. With a child, like I've had many moments, as I said to you, where I remember one day at the track, Wyatt was on track and field, and these little boys were making fun of him. Why does he do this? And I saw them talking amongst themselves, and I went over and I said, can I talk to you? I'm Wyatt's mom. Yeah. And I said, I know you're making fun of my son. And I said, I just want to explain something to you. He has autism, and da-da-da. And you know what? They listened, and they understood. Yeah. Because that was just simply not being educated. Right. And kids can be cruel, but this is an adult. Yeah. And we expect more from adults. And I do think it's an opportunity for us to say, where is the compassion? Where is the understanding? And I'm glad that Max, I wish Act Today could give him a grant. We only give grants to children that reside in the United States because the family's obviously in need.
And they are. And the grandmother confirmed that yesterday. And I asked her, the family's going to let us know if there's some way that we can all help that's substantive, and whether they're going to set up some sort of a fund that we can donate to. Because I know that they're having to pay out of pocket to have somebody come and be with him in the afternoon because the 70-year-old grandma just can't do it. So, but I think, in talking about this with other people last night, because of course there were lots of phone calls and things coming in, and we welcome, if you have input right now, put it on the site and I'll read it. But people were saying to me, this just made me so mad. People who don't have kids on the autism spectrum. And anytime somebody goes this far out of the way, I think what it does is it forces everyone to take a stand. Right. We move through our lives a lot of times and we don't notice the things that are happening to other people. And this, I will say, the one motivating thing about this was that it forced a lot of people to go, look, this crossed a line. This is so not okay. And I also think for a lot of us, and I know you got emotional reading it, and you said it felt like a kick to the gut, because there's at least one line in here that each autism parent has met somewhere along the line from someone, right? Where we have been told that just because you have a special needs kid doesn't mean you're entitled to anything.
I was told that to somebody that sits on the Los Angeles school board.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Monica Holloway came in and shared with us that a judge, a sitting judge in Los Angeles, said this to her a month ago.
I know. And I said, let's start a petition on change.org and get them off the...
And I wanted to give you a follow-up on that, she went to pursue it, but because they have a thing that they're pursuing with lawyers against him, she can't until that's put in. But
guy needs to be off the bench. period.
Absolutely. So the first step is for the lawyers, and then once that's all in and the paperwork is in, then she can do the change.org. But I think we've all met this in some way and somehow. There was another story that we were going to talk about in the news about a group of children in Scotland. And we did talk about this a little bit on Monday, but again, I always want your input on these things. So do you want to encapsulate for anybody who missed
this
when we
was in
talked about
Scotland. So,
Monday?
this, first of all, we're not just an autism nation, we're an autism world.
Yeah.
With national rates, who knows what the aggregate number is, but with some countries like South Korea having huge rates, and we know England and we know a lot of the European countries have very high rates of autism.
Absolutely.
We have not done assessments in other areas, but this happened to take place in Scotland, and a group of special needs children as young as 4 were told to sit on the floor of a train rather than in empty first-class seats because they would spoil the ambiance of the carriage. And the youngsters were from a theater group, okay? And they were on their way back from a trip to Edinburgh Fringe Festival, and they found standard class packed to the brim, and so they had to sit right outside the toilets on the floor of the train. So when the volunteers went to the train manager and said, would it be possible for our children to take some empty seats? They said, absolutely not. We do not, I quote, we do not need the likes of your children spoiling their journey.
Yeah.
And even though other families were allowed into that section that paid standard fare, the children were not. So, a spokesman apologized.
Right, and they've said that they're going to investigate it, that they don't believe in discrimination, but these kinds of things happen. I shared on the show on Monday that I went to see a play this weekend and had a very related experience.
Did you? What happened?
That it was a play that was really about these kinds of things, about when somebody is different and how everybody else deals with it and how people think it's inconvenient when somebody's different and you're kind of, killing my buzz on what I'm trying to do. It was a parody on the Peanuts crowd, the grown-up, the Charlie Brown crowd. And now Pigpen is an adult, and he's homeless and a drug addict, and everybody's like, can't you just get it together, Pigpen? Why can't you? And he's saying, I have issues. And and they're all like, just get it together, get over it and get it together. But in the audience, there was a man in the audience who was laughing really loud in this sort of rapid-fire machine gun kind of thing. And it was disruptive. It was really disruptive. And it took me maybe 10 minutes into the play to realize that this young man
was on the spectrum.
I don't know if he was on the spectrum or he was developmentally disabled. And he was with a group that was there to see this play. And he was appreciating this play. His appreciation of the play made it harder, admittedly, for the rest of us to access it because sometimes he was laughing and we couldn't hear a line. But I, like 10 minutes in went, he has other things going on. He has as much right to be here as I do. But other people in the audience didn't feel that way.
Really?
And even there were moments during the play where a couple of people shouted out and said, shut up.
Oh, nice.
And people who asked, but they had no awareness that this young man was coming from a different place than they were. None, which was stunning to me. At intermission, when people were like, they need to kick him out, they need to make him leave. And I said, to people that I did not know, that I was just sitting near, I said, are we not aware of the fact that there's something else going on?
And are we not aware of the message of the play itself?
And I said, don't you find it interesting as a theater goer that what's happening on the stage is happening in the audience? Is it not uplifting the message to you? Because I had chills. I was like, I am living what we're seeing, and it was fascinating to me.
Like a mirror, and people just didn't get it.
And they didn't realize it. They were like, oh, do you think he has something else going on? They did not. That was not a part of their consciousness. And I had to be honest and think that, boy, 10 years ago, would it have been in mine? I don't think it would have occurred to me.
I don't think it would have occurred to me. 11, 12 years ago.
But I walked out of the theater to my car behind the group of people. And I happen to love, there's a play called The Boys Next Door, which is about a group of people living in a group home. And I said, I felt like I was walking behind the real life cast of The Boys Next Door. And they were talking about how much they loved the play. And I got to see in their bodies how much it meant to them to be there. And they weren't in any way aware of the fact that the one person's laughter had created something in the audience, both good and bad. But I just saw how, and as I was leaving and walked by, the box office, there were people standing there complaining, saying, we should get our money back because this person was disruptive. And I thought, wow, we really do live in a society where people think, I'm entitled to this. I paid, so I get to have the experience that I want. And we don't think about the fact that other people on the train are having an experience, and other people in the theater are having an experience, and other people are in their front yard and they're making noises. And what makes you think that if you live in a neighborhood that you get to legislate what noises a child makes in another person's front yard? When did we become that entitled?
When my feeling is that the world's always been that way. Money rules. And people with that kind of money and privilege generally believe they're entitled to things. I'm not saying that as a blanket statement, but that they can. I think that people think that their status and their money and their privilege allows them to cut out the world. Okay? Yeah. Well, the world is still going on. Disabilities are still going on. Differences are still going on. And we have to learn to accept them, and we have to educate the world about them as well.
Well, and it's really, when you get right down to it, here's the irony, it's about perspective taking. We're always trying to get our kids to take other people's perspective, and how often do people take their perspective?
Yeah. I know.
That's really what it's about. We all need a course in perspective taking.
Yeah, we still live in a neurotypical world, and it's going to have neurotypical judgments. Parents like us and people that are listening to this show and people in the autism community have a tough road in terms of making people aware and educating, and that battle for the typical world to learn compassion.
But is perspective taking something that is a part of the neurotypical world? This is what I'm finding out and being disappointed. I'm finding out that it isn't.
I would agree with that.
They're not taking perspective of anybody but themselves.
I live in a very wealthy, gated neighborhood, in one of the cheapest houses in the neighborhood, old ranch house, Hidden Hills, California, that was built, in 1955. And anyway, they bulldozed those homes. There's homes in the neighborhood that are 25,000 square feet, so that'll give you an idea. Lots of celebrities live in there. And I have conversations with neighbors who literally, I heard a woman go off for 20 minutes one morning because her heated towel racks and her heated floors were not ready in her new house. You would have thought that her house burnt down or her husband died. It was the most mind-boggling conversation to me.
Yeah.
And that, everybody has their own space and own perspective, and you're right. It's hard to believe, but it's pretty much the case, I think.
Have you seen this show, the movie Mary and Margaret on HBO? It's playing right now on HBO.
No,
it's a HBO original, and Hilary Swank stars in it. It's about two women who meet in South Africa because they're both of their sons, vastly different circumstances, die of malaria.
Okay.
One of them is a 10-year-old who dies of malaria. The other one, it was a teacher, an adult who went there, but they both died of malaria, and they get together to try to change the way malaria is dealt with in South Africa. And there's a moment when the mother of the 10-year-old comes back to the United States after having been in Africa and having lost her son and trying to make a difference. She comes home and she's at a pool party with a bunch of her old friends, and one of the women is going on about, well, I don't know whether to get this SUV or that SUV, and she stands up and says, I can't do this. I cannot sit here with you women anymore and talk about trivial things when children are dying around the world. I'm sorry, I can't sit here and pretend that it's okay. And the women go, oh, you're not going to go off the deep end now, are you?
Yeah.
And she goes, yeah, I guess I am.
Yeah, I guess I am going to go off the deep end.
And she leaves, you know, and it's a very powerful scene.
It's interesting. I invited some of my closest girlfriends to come to my church on Saturday night because we run the West Valley Food Pantry, and we have a ministry for the homeless and the hungry in the valley, and we are feeding families on Saturday night from 5 to 7. So my girlfriends are always, you know, asking me to go out for drinks. I've asked them to go to this with me and help me feed the homeless. Well, there was kind of this dead silence, you know, and then I started talking to one of them and saying, well, you know, this could be very interesting for you because, you know, I think it'll give you a good perspective, you know, and I'd love it if you'd come with me, but, you know, no pressure. And she keeps thinking about it, and she's talking about it, and she's like, you know what, I'm in. And she goes, let's get some of the other friends to come too. And I said, well, you know, I'm not going to hard sell. You know, let's just go. I'll mention it to them. I'll send out an email and see if anybody wants to come. But there's nothing like showing people the reality. Yeah. I know one of the families that frequents the pantry. It's a mom who, because of a string of very, very horrible things out of her control, living in her car with her 3 kids. Yeah. And you know, sometimes when we see that, maybe the heated towel racks, having food in the house. Well, you know, it gives you a little perspective.
It does. Did you do this every Saturday?
No, this is a special thing.
Okay.
And
well, I want to know the next time.
Okay.
Can I bring Jem? Is that the kind of thing where I could bring Jem?
Yeah,
or
I
no?
think you could. Yeah,
Because I would love
the
to
families are there.
have that kind of experience.
Yeah, exactly. It's very good for kids to have that experience. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that would be
I'm always
really
trying
fun.
to teach Wyatt about that. Yeah. You know, and I tell him what Mommy does is we raise money for kids who don't have things. Yeah. Kids with autism who don't have things. And sometimes as I'm walking out the door to work, he says, Mommy, I don't want you to go raise money for kids who don't have things. I want you to stay here with me.
He's a kid. He gets to be a kid. Yeah. We should take a break before Emily fires us.
I know.
All right, we'll be back after these messages.
Ready, guys? Cameras up. And action.
This is the second year of our Act a Day for Military Families Inclusion Film Camp, led by Joey Travolta with our fabulous partners, Cox Communications.
One of the wonderful things about this camp is that it allows these children to have a voice that they otherwise would not have. And it is a story of how lives can be transformed, new friends can be found, and they can excel in the right kind of learning environment.
Quiet on the set is a term we use when we need quiet. Filmmaking is about communication, and if everybody's talking over each other, you can't communicate.
Everything that has to do with filmmaking goes into everyday life. So we use filmmaking as a vehicle to teach them to work together as a team and give them social skills and confidence.
What if we try something different and see if we like it better or not?
What about ghosts?
Want to try ghosts?
Yeah.
These kids, they all make a film from conception through the writing process, developing their own ideas. Then we write the script, we cast it, shoot it, edit it. At the end of the day, we end up with a realized project.
All right.
With kids on the autism spectrum, you never know what you're going to get. There's a lot of unpredictability, and so our staff is there to help provide sort of a comfort, a sense of ease to try to be flexible within the inclusion film camp, because they're asking the kids to do a lot of things that they may be uncomfortable doing or that might be new to them.
Film is reality. It's what we do every day, right? And I'm realistically talking to you. And I'm having a conversation about cinema, which we all love. That's why we're here at this film camp.
The theme this year is the Inclusion Network. So what it is, it's like a TV network. So we have TV shows, we have movies, there'll be little news segments, we have TV commercials. They came up with some really great ideas.
Hey, here comes Joey to hear the pitch today. Hey, how's it going? I'm sorry. Molly, I'm Joey. Nice to meet you. So explain the idea.
Our movie is about a corporation, and the 4 main characters, Fury, Death, War, and Strife, are former employees.
You know what? If someone came in and said their name was Fury or Death or Strife, that would send up a red flag right away. Probably why they're not working anymore. Go ahead.
Exciting thing about this collaboration, you have the core, which is Act Today for the military, which is how this whole thing started, and then the support of Cox Communication, because we didn't know whether we would be able to do this again this year. But they band together, they saw the importance of the program, and they're able to really have something special for the community. I mean, this being in the San Diego Film Festival as a special screening is huge.
Okay, let's have John come out there. Come on, John.
John loves this camp. It really gives him the hands-on time to work and to be among kids who have his interest.
John, how was this experience as you came all the way from Oregon to be in our film camp? Awesome! Awesome.
Michael happens to love making films, and he was so excited, and we saw a difference from day one. Michael, you want to say something about what this?
Did you love the camp?
Yes, I did very much.
I'm so glad you were able to do it this year. Would you come back next year?
Yes, I believe yes.
How was your experience this year at film camp, Mackenzie?
It was very, very rewarding. I thought it was a great experience, and I hope to do it again next year.
Last year, after attending this camp, my son Mackenzie spoke in front of a group for the first time, and that was at school. And his teacher was so excited that she cried and then emailed me to tell me about it. So it was exciting. It's just one of those things that we've all gone through together. His growth has been phenomenal.
When you look at the challenges that occur when you have a special needs child in a family, but then you add on the military component of a deployed parent or relocation and the challenges that come with that, then it just starts to exasperate. And so if there's one space, one way that we can help a family here that belongs to the military, then we really can help change a life.
How many of you are military families? Raise your hand. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for what you do for our country. And we are there to help your kids. We'll be back next year. And I want to say that if they were casting a movie about superheroes, all of you would be the stars. You're all heroic. Thank you.
Thank you so much, man.
Well, that was our new Act Today for Military Families film camp, Inclusion Film Camp, that we did down in San Diego. That's our new video following this last year, this summer. And our wonderful Amy Zhang went down there and was there every day with the kids, and I came in for the last day, and Joey Travolta, just the wonderful guy that he is. I think this year, it was even better than last year, if I can say that. A lot of the same kids came back. They had had such positive improvements after taking part in the camp last year that the parents were just begging to bring some of their kids back. And there was a moment in there where you saw, I'm looking at myself slouching on camera, there was a moment there that you saw a mom, military mom with her two kids. Michael was the young man, and his twin sister, and that's the young girl.
Beautiful long hair.
That's the young girl that I had the discussion about, because she was so emotional about her brother, and in tears, and said that this was the first place he really felt like he belonged, and all she wanted was for him to be happy. And you know, I hugged her and said, "I know what it's like, darling. You know, having grown up with a brother, and I just know how hard it's been on you, and what a heroic sister you are to Michael. So that was a real special moment for me, having that.
Yeah, you guys had a tear-filled moment, and she was still crying when they had her on camera there. It's very emotional.
Yeah, she had been crying in my arms, and then we did that interview.
A lovely thing that you do. A really lovely, lovely camp that you do.
It's great.
And I love that it not only benefits kids who have parents who are in the military in some way, but their siblings.
Their siblings. Their typical siblings get to come. And for some of these kids, it's the first time they've ever really bonded with that sibling.
Yeah.
Because they've always been used to being known as the special needs child, and then the other sibling gets some resentments and things. So for the siblings to do the camp with you know, their sibling with autism, it really bonds them in ways that they haven't before.
And look, we all need a place to fit in, and when they're sitting at the table with all the other siblings and seeing I'm not the only kid that has these issues, and I've got somebody that I can talk to, I imagine that makes lifelong friends.
It does. Well, lifelong friends, and it's very powerful for them. And the mothers and fathers get lifelong friends.
Isn't that a wonderful thing?
In that area. So it's really great.
It's fabulous.
So we have more that we wanted to talk about in the news.
Yes.
And there was an article in the UK press, and it was a profile really of one of the first people to be diagnosed with autism. He is almost 60. His name is Timothy Barron, and he lives in residential care, which would be very common, obviously, for anybody diagnosed probably, let's say if he was diagnosed when he was 5, so 55 years ago, he would have been probably immediately, the parents would have been told probably to put him in a residential care.
That's what they did then.
That's what they did then, along with telling the mothers it was their fault.
Right.
For not bonding with the infant properly.
Right.
You know, if we could turn back the hands of time, boy.
Yeah.
But his father is a widower, and Michael Barron, and he really, his main concern throughout this article was his pressing need to know what is going to happen when I'm gone. At 84, this man said he just has nightmares about, because he's still very bonded to his son, he visits him every day. What's going to happen to my son and his peers who are the invisible population? And these are the kids that the recovery train was not there yet, okay? That whole recovery movement, early intervention,
even the idea of ABA for autism hadn't come across then.
It hadn't really been pioneered by Ivar Lovaas.
No.
And so they received very little interventions. And oftentimes you can see some of these older kids, if you go to some of the, like the Autism Speaks walks, I always see them there. And a lot of them are in wheelchairs and in helmets and various
tether. Not unusual to see them on a tether, or having body armor on them so that if they injure themselves.
Behaviors,
Yeah, absolutely. It's really eye-opening when we see that. And one of the things that I really appreciated about this article is that in England they put together a commission to study what the effects of autism are on this aging population.
Right.
I don't think that really had entered my consciousness until this article, Nancy. I mean, I was so in that mode of we got to get early intervention,
right?
And then we have to get things in place for when the hormones hit,
right?
And now I'm starting to think about adulthood and getting ready for it. But elderly, senior citizen, Jem, I have not.
It's
allowed
hard
to enter my consciousness yet.
This is every parent's fear, and this is in the dark recesses of our minds.
Of course it is. So I appreciate that they're going to be studying it, and that the hope is that they're going to be able to come up with some supports for that aging population of autism, because they deserve it. They've gotten left off, the dinner invitation to everything good that's happened with autism continually.
I know. And we forget about them. They are the forgotten, the invisible population. So that's a positive that they're going to be doing more about that in the UK and hopefully here in America, as we know. And then there's another article in terms about aging and autism that new research has shown that children with autism experience chemical changes in their brains between the ages of 3 to 10 that distinguish them from their other children, obviously. But this reported that concentration of N-acetyl aspartate which plays an important role in brain functions, rises over time in autistic children. In children without autism, the chemical compound remains at low levels. So children with autism show a very different developmental course than children who had developmental delays without autism. We're hoping to better understand what the processes are so we can develop more focused interventions. So I'm not really sure how to interpret that, whether the rise of this chemical causes our children to become more severe, or it sounds like it does.
Well, and I don't even know about that, but I hope that as they look at this, they start to look at what triggers that N-acetylaspartate to grow in our kids. And then maybe if down the road they can figure out how to stop that.
Right.
My first question is, how does this relate to yeast?
Okay.
And I don't know that it does.
Yeah.
But I want to know, does this N-acetylaspartate... There were a couple of studies that were done years ago, right around when Jem was being diagnosed, that they were trying to do MRIs. Imagine how hard this is, and I know they're still working on this, to do MRIs of children who were at-risk brains before they reached the age of 3, and then come back and do, get an independent diagnosis, come back and take another MRI of the brain, and really difficult to do. You're spending thousands of dollars hoping that you're going to hit a mark and catch a kid before something happens and then catch them afterwards. But what they were postulating that they were going to see, because they had begun to see this in some kids, is that something happens, there's a trigger, and the brain starts to develop too quick. That they were noticing that in some kids with autism that their brains had grown bigger.
I've read that.
Right, that in a 5-year-old the brain was the size of what it should be for a 14-year-old.
Right.
And they were talking about when the brain grows that fast, that sometimes you get long distance service, but you don't have local distance service. So kids could access these things that were far and away ahead of where they should be, but they couldn't access little things like, making eye contact with somebody and feeling pleasure from the fact that someone made eye contact back. That was very interesting to me, and I remembered thinking then, what's triggering that brain growth? What is it? Then, the more we learned with Jem, we see with Jem that there's a yeast connection with all of his things. You've said before that not so much with Wyatt.
Well, he never tested as having high levels of yeast. I don't know if that's the case now.
Right.
Because we're not with a biomedical physician right now.
Well, and every time you get tested, it's a lot of money.
Yeah.
Who has the money to go and get tested every other minute?
We're not doing biomedical at the moment, but I don't know where he is with yeast. I've always had questions about that, and every time that we were with a DAN doctor, they would always say there's no yeast overgrowth. One of the things that I have a question about, that I've always wondered, and this is for Doreen, so we need Dr. Doreen back for this one. If all of these brain developments and chemicals like this rise of N-acetylaspartate, then what about the kids that have had no biomedical interventions and have only had ABA starting at the age of 2? What happens to all these chemical makeups of the brain? How does ABA affect that?
Well, they've started to do studies about looking at brains when taking a picture when a child has been diagnosed with autism, they're about to start ABA therapy, and they've just started ABA therapy, and they take an MRI of their brain, and then they come back a year later and take another MRI, and they are seeing a difference in the child's brain before and after ABA.
So the ABA is really affecting the neural pathways. It's opening them up, and it's maybe it's preventing certain chemical reactions that would occur with children that aren't getting the intervention.
I think when the actual physical manifestation of the brain changes, I would postulate that the chemicals are changing as well. I mean, when you think about our chemicals change in our brain on a daily and certainly monthly for women basis, that the amount of chemical that I have in my brain is dependent on the hormones that I have coursing through my veins. So I would imagine that there are ways, and there are, I'm only going to speak for myself, that when I have horrible PMS, there are some things that I can eat or do or engage in that make that better and change the chemical makeup of my brain for that period of time. So we all want to have, I'm allergic to chocolate, thank God, because could you imagine how fat I would be if I wasn't allergic to chocolate? It would be really, really bad. But I know lots of women, they're like, I have PMS, I have to have chocolate. I will feel better when I have chocolate. So I don't know why it would be different for our kids that we couldn't change the chemical makeup of their brain by having them behave in a certain way.
Okay. Because I've often wondered, like, I know many children have been recovered by Doreen and CARD that never had biomedical. And so they didn't have any yeast. They didn't have anything for yeast. They didn't have chelation. They didn't have any of this. Only ABA, and they recovered only through ABA. How did they stop the things that I see as like Wyatt stimming and his perseveration? A lot of that seems to me to be biomedical. It doesn't seem to be just behavioral.
Yes. And I have had many experts in here that we've kind of posed those kinds of questions, and what I hear is that there's autism and then there are all these other medical issues that go alongside sometimes. And that I know for Jem, when we got his yeast under control, he was able to learn at a different rate.
Okay.
But if we hadn't gotten the yeast under control, I don't think he would be one of those kids that did really well.
Right. I need to check that yeast thing out.
But there are other things as well. Yeast isn't the only thing, but there are other things. But but my question, because of what we have, is what does yeast have to do with this and acetyl aspartate?
I see that.
All right.
Now this is a positive story.
Yes, we love that.
That applies to our children. Autistic kids' enhanced math abilities tied to their unique brain organization. So there we go. We have something great, that the different wiring of autistic kids' brains seems to confer enhanced math abilities. Yay, something positive. A new study published in Biological Psychiatry showed that children with autism consistently perform better on math tests compared to non-autistic children in the same IQ range. That's an important distinction, because you can't take a different IQ range. Right. And this was done at Stanford, right here in the USA, gave 36 children with and without autism, all the way to IQs in the normal range, a math test. The autistic kids lacking in social skills were shown to have superior math and analytic abilities. To follow up, they took MRIs of the kids' brains while doing math. They found that autistic kids had increased activity in an area of the brain known for processing visual objects and perception, an area called the ventral temporal occipital?
I think it's occipital.
Occipital cortex, suggesting that they may have novel ways of processing information. And we know computers, things like that. I cannot believe how my son memorizes numbers. Like, we'll be listening to my best friend does these compilation CDs, and lately they're all like heavy metal, like We Will Rock You and Let the Body Hit the Floor and stuff like that. And so, and sometimes there are movies like Chicken Little, One Little Slip and things like that. These really, I love the songs. In the morning we rock out going to school. He goes, Mommy, let's rock out to Queen. So, but he knows exactly what number on the CD. The minute I go, well, let me find it. It's 14. But let me find that. And it's all 6 CDs that are loaded. He knows every single number by heart.
Right. Isn't that amazing how our kids, how they organize that kind of information?
Visually.
And I was just saying to Dr. Granpeesheh as she was leaving, talking about Jem, and finally he's at a place where I can talk to him about how he processes
How
things.
he processes.
And,
That's great.
And I told the story before about him looking at a picture for just a second that had a bunch of cats in it, and later on, like maybe 20 minutes later when we were talking about it, I said, oh, there were like 64 cats, and he said, no, there were 13. And I said to my husband, give me that picture. Get that picture back up on the phone. I want to know if there were really 13, and there were. And they were all smushed together in this guy's arms. And I said, how were you able to count them that quickly? How did you know? And he said, oh, it's like my brain took a picture of it, and then I went into that picture like in a computer program, and I could take my finger and drag each one of the cats up into a line, and I could count them. And he said, you can't do that? And I said, no, Mommy can't do that.
You know what?
Mommy can't do that even a little.
I don't think you need to worry. Jim's going to he's going to excel in, I know, computers. He's really brilliant in these
Yeah, but
areas.
he has his issues.
Well,
I mean,
of
it's
course.
just the thing we were talking about with Dr. Granpeesheh, that they have areas where they're good and areas where
Wyatt
they're
with
not.
his art. You should see this latest thing he's painting. It's just incredible.
Amazing.
Yeah. So anyway, we have so many blessings, don't we?
Yes, we do.
All right. So let's see how we. Okay. Let's cover this one more. Now we've talked about this one before, but this is a different study. Autism may be overlooked in young Latino children. You think?
There we have again the duh.
The duh hurl. I love that.
The duh heard around the world.
Hurled around the world. Latino children are generally diagnosed with autism 2 years later than Caucasian children, a latest study reveals.
I'm sorry, that's criminal.
Criminal. The reasons behind this could be lack of language-appropriate screenings and no easy access to autism experts, which is why Act Today has been and CARD, we've been very aggressive about legislative changes to help the Latino population. And this was at Oregon Health and Science University in Portland. Detection of the disorder early, the duh hurled around the world, could result in better treatment and results. The study found that only 1 in 10 pediatricians with Latino children were able to run the general developmental screenings and autism-specific screenings. So the pediatricians need to be educated. We're trying to do that with our Act Today Espanol program.
Great.
What we're doing is we're getting a lot of the CARD materials. We're translating them into Spanish. We're going to get them distributed. And then we also did a series here, a DVD with Gabriela Tessier on our board, and who's an anchor at Univision, and Dr. Evelyn Garcia, explaining the early warning signs. If you need information, go to act-today.org and go to Act Today Espanol. You can watch those videos. So the results showed that only 29% out of 80% of children were offered Spanish language screening. We have to get better at this, people.
Yeah, it's unconscionable. It's absolutely unconscionable. We should take one more break.
Let's take a break, and then there's only 2 stories that I think we should finish up with.
Lots to cover in the news this week, but stick with us. We're going to be right back after these messages.
The Center for Autism and Related Disorders strives to make autism treatment a reality for all children. We're happy to announce the opening of our newest treatment center in Thousand Oaks, California. To schedule an appointment, contact CARD today.
Welcome back.
We're back. We wanted to just talk about this story that has come up that's pretty huge in terms of the developmental delayed community. Could it be a cure? Breakthrough prompts Down syndrome, soul searching. The scientists at the University of Massachusetts found a way to silence the extra chromosome that causes Down syndrome, which is causing parents everywhere that have children with Down syndrome to question, is this a good thing? A world without our precious children? Yes, life is hard with them. Yes, they're different. Yes, some of the parents are like, if I could take away their Down syndrome, I would, but would they be the same child? It really begs the question with autism, because this may be coming up. This may be coming up in the form of a pill for our children with autism. This may be coming up in the form of something with a treatment prenatally. Ethically, morally, where does this leave us? And if people are going to choose to do this, it's just a conundrum, isn't it?
Well, you and I talked about this briefly after the show last week, and I was saying we just had David Humphrey on the show a couple of weeks ago, who is the CEO of Kirkman Labs, and he was talking about some of the studies that are out there, and he said, you know, you realize that years ago when they were trying to do the genetic testing to test in utero to see if a child had Down syndrome, that part of the reason why they were doing that was because if you knew there were a chance that there were going to be parents who wouldn't follow through on that pregnancy, that they would abort.
Of course.
And that was part of the reason why the government, and they weren't even shy about it, saying that that's why they did it. They put that money there because it is a drain on resources later on, is the rationale, which kind of gets my back up already. And that now there's been a big push in recent years to genetically map for autism so that there eventually we'll get to the point where we'll be able to tell in utero, supposedly, if we have a child who's prone to be on the autism spectrum. I really get concerned because when my child was first diagnosed, if you had offered me a pill and said, it will get rid of this, I would have taken it with no hesitation. I absolutely would have done that. Now that my son is older and I've learned as much about autism that I have, if we have a world that doesn't have individuals who are on the autism spectrum, I don't think we survive.
I'm with you on that, and I have to say that if I had not had a younger brother, David, with Down syndrome that I helped raise and spent 38 years of his life with him, I would not be the person I am today. Yeah. If I did not have my son, if Wyatt didn't have autism, he wouldn't be Wyatt. And he led me to a calling to help other families that I never would have had, that has been far more fulfilling than a career in television. So, would I take away everything? No.
Yeah.
For those parents, though, that don't have the resources, for the children that have horribly self-destructive behaviors, we know the dark side. And if we can take that part away, yes. But can we take that away and leave the good? That's the question, and we don't have the answer.
No, we don't have the question for it. We don't have the answer for it. It really, and I think it does depend where you are on it, and it's very personal.
Very.
I would never judge anybody who said, no, if there was a pill, I would give it to my kid right away. I wouldn't judge them at all.
Absolutely
And
not.
I know I would have done that at one point.
Me too.
It's not clear to me anymore. It was about a year ago that my husband and I heard about all the stem cell, you know, because they're studying that now. There's a study going on right now in Arizona to see if stem cell transplants can reverse autism. And they have seen it reverse cerebral palsy. And I said to my husband, we don't have the stem cells, but if it works, in a couple of years, they'll be able to give someone else's stem cells. And I said, would we do this with Jem? And I think our decision at this point would be no.
Right. I think my decision would be no. And, you know, I heard they were using, on another note, I heard stem cells, the latest, it's going to, you talk about plastic surgery and all these things, you know, Botox, plastic surgery. A doctor told me that stem cells going to put us all out of business and I'll be first in line. And I thought, how sad. Well, everybody's going to be walking around looking completely like they're 10 years old. Nobody's going to have any age lines, any frowns, any... It's so, the beauty of the world without our older folks, without the wisdom, even without showing, as my grandmother once said when I asked her if she'd ever have plastic surgery, she said, darling, these are the lines I got from worrying about your grandfather, and these I got from laughing with him. Why would I get rid of them?
Love that. Well, we're really out of time here, but I want to let everybody know that you can now watch us live on your tablet devices, so please do that. I want to thank you so much for being here and the wonderful work that you do with ACT Today.
Thank you.
I don't even think we have time, Emily, to show them the different ways they can be in contact with us, but hopefully check us out on YouTube because there's lots of different ways that you can get in contact with us, and we appreciate
And we'll be back next week with some interesting guests, and I don't remember what they are, but we're going to have a lot of guests in the next coming week, and we'll let you know.
And we're going to be talking about IEPs and how to
back
get
to school
back
and
to school,
issues.
how you get through this transition now and make things work. So I will be back tomorrow. We've got some wonderful, wonderful guests for you tomorrow. Until then, please give your kiddos a hug from me.
And give yourselves a hug from me.
Bye-bye for now.